London-based consultant with nearly 30 years of working in the fashion and creative industries, is our next guest. In London College of Fashion, she founded the renowned training department, launching successful summer schools, evening courses, study abroad and tailor-made training for corporate clients, enabled the college to reach wider audiences. El conocimiento de nuestra siguiente ponente sobre la moda se basa en 30 años de experiencia y viajes, así como en su visión única de las políticas locales y nacionales para el desarrollo de estrategias de posicionamiento para el desarrollo de las industrias turísticas creativas basadas en la moda. Es consultora de gestión y desarrollo de negocios de moda en Fashion City Insider y su ponencia, el surgimiento del turismo de moda como un activo para las ciudades. Please let me give you Jan Miller.
Okay, well, thank you for inviting me to this forum today. I'd like to thank my fellow speakers for such fantastic thoughts and insights into fashion cities and some really interesting insights into the fashion of the Basque District as well. I think my presentation follows on nicely from Kat's about Antwerp as a fashion city. As you heard, Antwerp is a city which is very aware of how fashion and fashion tourism is an asset which can be utilised for maximum effect to make a city distinctive and an attractive place to visit, study, shop, live and do business in. But I'm aware that there's going to be many people in the audience today and watching through the live streaming not quite aware of what fashion tourism is. It's a topic that's been staring us all in the face for a few years, and it's coming more and more into the limelight because of the passionate and talented people we have working in the fashion industry today, who through their creative industries networks, and they're making the cities more interesting and attractive. What's more, they can make exciting, high-profile, informative events happen relatively easily. My presentation today is an introduction to fashion tourism, and within it I want to demonstrate how it can be a valuable asset to cities in the future to drive parts of their economy. But because of its relative newness, I want to give you a bit of background and context. I'll describe 3 niche tourism sectors that converge into fashion tourism, and then I'll talk about fashion cities and events. Once you start to dig deep into fashion tourism, you'll be surprised how deep it is that it's permeating into our lives and economy. I don't know quite how to do that one. Yes. Okay. So within fashion tourism, there's a huge range of spillover effects. It provides work and revenues for much wider ecosystems, printers, media agencies, set designers and even florists. It supports the hospitality industry because people have to stay and eat somewhere when they're travelling to a fashion city or a fashion event. It also supports the travel industry, travelling to and from and within a city. And retail, because most people like to shop when they travel, to take a souvenir back home with them, to remind themselves of their visit. And it impacts on the cultural industries when we visit attractions like museums and galleries and so on. This all maintains and hopefully even creates jobs, which enables local people to remain employed and living and spending money in the cities. No. But first, a little bit about me. I've got nearly 30 years experience in the fashion industry under my belt. I'm a consultant based mainly in the UK and London, and I do a lot of work with clients on special projects. As you can see from my project and client list, my focus is around creative, cultural and fashion industry strategies and project implementation. A large part of my time is taken up with consulting at the Centre Fashion Enterprise in London, also known as the CFE. It's Europe's leading fashion incubator, supporting women's and menswear designers. I have a strategic development role at the CFE, but I also mentor the young fashion talent and that they're incubating in the early stages of their businesses. I'm in my 10th year there now, and I've mentored close to 100 designers, including Erdem, Peter Pilotto and Mary Katransu. I count myself as very lucky to have been part of their journey, and with this has come a 10-year involvement in London Fashion Week, during which time I've seen it evolve from a trade fair into a mega event promoting London. I'm also Editor-in-Chief at Fashion City Insider, which is an online window for fashion tourism in London, Paris and New York. I launched it just over a year ago, and it's been an incredible journey talking to so many fashion insiders about their inspiring fashion city. They've really got behind the concept of talking about the experiences of fashion rather than fashion product. The plan is to roll it out to more cities. So I hope this brief intro places me in context about how I've come to be here on the podium today. To get you into the fashion tourism mindset, I want you to reflect upon a famous quote by Coco Chanel. Fashion is not something that exists in dresses only. Fashion's in the sky, in the street. Fashion has to do with ideas, the way we live and what's happening. So I'd like to hang on to that thought. Fashion is no longer just about clothes, it's also about the way we experience fashion. So what is fashion tourism? Well, a couple of years ago, I was looking for a definition and noted there wasn't an entry on Wikipedia. So I went about researching one, and this is the one I came up with and put onto Wikipedia. It's the interaction between destination marketing offices, trade associations, tourism suppliers, and host communities, with people travelling to and visiting a particular place for business or leisure, to enjoy, experiment, discover, study, trade, communicate about and consume fashion. I wanted to get across that fashion tourism is inclusive. It involves the public and also fashion trade people, and importantly, it includes places, usually a city, major town or region where fashion things are going on. From an academic perspective, fashion tourism is the niche space that's emerged out of shopping tourism, cultural tourism and creative industries tourism. It's a convergence of the three, and I believe it's been particularly accelerated by the fashion industry's embracing of digital media. I'm going to give you some examples of how cities are increasingly using these three niche sectors for the development of tourism and other industries to boost their economic fortune and to position themselves in the global market. There's often no need for fashion cities to specialise in any new activity, but rather they can diversify the economy and develop tourism products to promote their city. Fashion is often an asset which many cities can use in this way to their advantage. So, shopping tourism. People are increasingly choosing shopping as a way to experience local culture through an engagement with local products and local craftspeople. Shopping's become a motive to travel as people are looking for an exciting opportunity to shop whilst travelling. And some destinations provide special shopping activities for tourists, and there's plenty of evidence to back this up. Recent tourism research by the US Office of Travel and Tourism Industries on tourist performance shows that shopping ranks as the top participation activity of 90% of Asian tourists interviewed, 86% of Western European tourists, and 85% of Eastern European tourists. The Asian tourist market is very important to the Western fashion shopping cities. They're particularly motivated to travel to shop for their favourite foreign brands, which are much cheaper in Europe compared with back home where there's high import taxes. Clothing and shoes rank the most important items for retail purchases by shopping tourists, and destinations selling quality branded items in this category often fare better than others in terms of increased inbound visitor numbers for the purpose of shopping. Many European retailers are now working closely with the BRIC tour country operators to be included in their tours. For example, 95% of Chinese visitors to Louis Vuitton shops in Paris are through organised tours. Approximately 50% of sales of luxury goods in Western Europe are generated by foreigners, which means only 50% are sold to home market audiences. And in fact, global travel could generate as much as 30% of total sales of luxury goods. Increased awareness raising within the retail sector of the potential benefits of shopping tourism is creating new jobs. All the major luxury department stores in the major fashion capitals now employ professionals who are responsible for developing VIP shopping services for overseas customers and building relationships with overseas tour operators and travel companies to ensure their store is on the itineraries. The growth in shopping tourism is offering up new opportunities across the globe for travel and tourism companies, destination marketing organisations, and retail and hotel groups to develop strategies to capitalise on the potential growth. Typical strategies I see include greater collaborations between retailers and tourism stakeholders, increasing numbers of shopping festivals, increasing awareness raising within the retail sector of the potential benefits of shopping tourism. If you visited Heathrow Terminal 5 recently, you'll know what I mean. At Terminal 5, there's a Louis Vuitton store, Mulberry, Harrods, Dior, Gucci, Prada and Paul Smith, amongst many other high-end stores located there. So cultural tourism, it's also a massive influencer on fashion tourism, and its depth is in the makeup of a city or place is far-reaching. On the screen, I apologise, it's in English, but there's a list of the main drivers for developing cultural tourism policies for a city. Linkages to fashion tourism are fashion exhibitions, costume archives, study tours, overseas study, participants in summer schools or conferences like today, and possibly fashion film festivals. And the success of it and impact of these events could be measured through increased cultural awareness of a place, increased event and brand visibility, participant numbers and engaging new audiences, VIP attendance, events or contact hours, ticket sales, spillover effects in on-site shops and cafes, spillover sales in the neighbourhoods, in the stores and restaurants, number of staff employed, including freelancers and employees, brand partnerships via sponsorship and deals, grants and awards, and regeneration and reappropriation of buildings and spaces. Cultural tourism products are usually high value with low impact, meaning high revenue earners, with little change to the local environment. So it's generally considered a good form of tourism, particularly as cultural tourists are estimated to spend as much as 1/3 more on average than other tourists travelling for this reason. It's therefore no surprise that many cities, regions and countries have developed their cultural tourism strategy and products to attract cultural tourists who tend to be educated, well off and well behaved. Barcelona is an interesting city to mention, particularly its long history of staging themed cultural events and festivals in order to promote major developments and expansion in the city. In 1992, it had the golden opportunity through the Summer Olympic Games. The world was going to be looking at the city, so it used this as a springboard to launch a series of annual Year Ofs, which included the Year of Gaudi in 2002, which was the 150th anniversary of his birth. It had a phenomenal impact, 55 million tourists that year, and an economic impact of 14 million euros. And with each subsequent year of festivities, there would be local investment in the ecosystem and businesses and infrastructure and venues in Barcelona. And not only did the festival strategy attract visitors to Barcelona as audiences, but they also increasingly came as participants, adding further depth to the cultural DNA of the city. However, even Barcelona, on this amazing trajectory as a cultural city, is having to adapt its strategy to meet new challenges. Mobile device technology is now driving new forms of cultural consumption. Cultural tourists are becoming more confident with researching and organising their own itineraries. They can access location-related information technologies, enabling them to explore new destinations, which don't necessarily have to be new, challenging or exotic locations. They can be nearer to home and even include seeking out what's local and to experience the atmosphere of places and to even live and immerse in the culture itself. It can provide a link between the artistic life of a city and tourists, enabling the tourist to make a cultural contribution to the city. Okay, so close on cultural tourism's heels is creative tourism, and that's moving into the limelight and growing in the minds of many policymakers in cities with creative credentials. As you can see from the list on the screen, there's some pretty compelling reasons for developing creativity and tourism policies. There's similarity with the drivers for cultural tourism, as I shared with you earlier, but there's two distinctive differences. The first being the economic spin-offs for creative development, and the second being the ability to create buzz and atmosphere. Linkages to fashion tourism are exploring neighbourhoods, guided tours, visiting ateliers, workshops and studios, watching red carpet events, attending fashion festivals, attending film screenings and even fashion film festivals. One of the interesting things about creative tourism is that creative experiences are often co-created from both the demand side and the production side. As already described in Barcelona, part of the cultural strategy resulted in more cultural people visiting and staying in the city. And this will also be one of the outcomes of a creative tourism strategy. So cities considering a creative tourism strategy need to be creative in themselves in order to attract creative visitors, who in turn would make the cities even more attractive for visitors, tourists, residents. And this convergence of the demand and supply factors leads to a growing demand for creative experiences in tourism. This combined creativity of local people and visitors can be harnessed to maximise the distinctiveness of places. But for creative development to happen in a city, there's two important considerations: visibility and accessibility. Firstly, attracting audiences requires a certain level of visibility in what is probably an already crowded market and landscape. The creative city, or possibly a smaller cluster or district, needs to be well known, or it may have problems attracting attention. Secondly, even if a creativity cluster or district manages to achieve a certain level of visibility, it's important that the creative enterprises within it have a certain level of accessibility and permeability. For example, in London, this is something that the British Fashion Council have been doing within its major events programmes. London Fashion Week is located in a public space so that fashion enthusiasts can experience the vibe, and there are always large screens around the sites with the fashion shows live streamed. The image on in the top left-hand corner on the screen is Somerset House, which is the venue that London Fashion Week has been hosting the exhibition, trade fair and shows for the last 5 years. It's about a 2-kilometre walk to London's Oxford Circus, which is one of London's prime retail districts. The image below it is an Art Deco car park in the heart of Soho, about a half a kilometre walk to Oxford Circus. So it's got a much closer proximity to retail. And the reason it's on the screen is the British Fashion Council, endorsed by the Mayor's Office, announced 2 weeks ago that it was going to be relocating London Fashion Week in September to this car park. They already know that the venue works well. They've trialled it out with the International Fashion Showcase, where Bilbao exhibited in February. So we look forward to seeing how they transform it in September. A further tactic that the British Fashion Council employs is to fully utilise their exhibition space after the breakdown of London Fashion Week. The venue morphs into a fashion festival titled London Fashion Weekend, which offers the public the opportunity to experience a bit more of the buzz around London Fashion Week through special shows, makeovers, meeting and shopping from local designers, as well as some of the more commonplace brands. And what's more, events like the British Fashion Awards on the right-hand side, and also run by the British Fashion Council. It was launched 30 years ago, and up until 2 years ago, it was a trade-only event. And then 2 years ago, it opened the doors to the paying public so that they could experience the glitz and red carpet atmosphere for themselves. Cities with this sort of buzz or atmosphere are much more attractive to live in, work in, and ultimately to visit. London's working hard to stay ahead. There is so much competition between the major capitals to be visible, so the city's competing to attract creative fashion talent to its universities and Fashion Week. And in doing so, London's becoming an even more attractive place to work and for like-minded tourists and visitors to visit. Capitalising effectively on these opportunities is not always easy, and it's not enough to expect creative tourism to develop just because a city is creative or has a creative asset. This simply isn't enough. Remember Barcelona with its golden opportunity of the Olympics, or indeed here in Bilbao with its investment in breathtaking architecture. All very tangible and iconic assets, but not enough on their own. Both cities are investing in their intangible assets, the people, the networks, the creative clusters, know-how. But this takes careful planning and design. But ultimately it will lead to making a place distinctive. However, one of the ironies of the growth of cultural and creative tourism is that some cities, in their quest to deliver experiences to tourists, have led to an almost duplication approach to cultural consumption, with vast numbers of tourists all visiting the same attractions. And I wanted to actively promote the avoidance of this approach in fashion tourism. In my experience in the UK, as fashion consumers, we're tired of the characterless high street that's replicated in every town and every city centre across the country, with the same brands prevalent everywhere, muscling out the small independent boutiques and atmosphere that gives our towns and cities unique character. Well, this replication is happening in tourism as well. We're all used to seeing the formulaic approach to city tourism, but this can lead to a decline in the city's authenticity and distinctiveness. As a consequence of this, tourists might start to avoid the once over-frequented attractions where investment's been made and seek out new places to explore on the fringes of the inner city, where there is a more cool and edgy vibe. These sorts of neighbourhoods like Hoxton, Hackney and Shoreditch in London, or Brooklyn and Williamsburg in New York, aren't necessarily planned and developed by the city offices or world-class architects. They're created by the people who live and work in the areas. You immediately know you're there just by the feel and atmosphere or buzz of the place. And this is an important point to make right now, to reinforce that it's as much about the people as the architecture, museums and retail units that create the life and identity of a city. So it's important for tourism authorities or individual event managers in the cities developing their fashion credentials to recognise that they cannot expect to have enough distinctiveness to draw in tourism numbers based on launching a new fashion week or festival. This simply isn't enough on its own. Fashion tourists will see through this and be disappointed in the long run. So to increase chances of success, it requires everyone working together, since fashion tourism products and services often tend to be developed by fashion people and not tourism professionals. Once a strategy is planned and resources implemented, it's important for cities to nurture their profile, which may take time, and also to invest in creating and developing a steady flow of attention. For fashion tourism, it needs the city to become fashionable and for the creative industries to be thriving so that the buzz and the atmosphere I mentioned before are commonplace. Some cities like New York, Paris and London don't have to work too hard at this because of their size and ability to mount mega events and schedules. But New York, London and Paris are not complacent. They're constantly developing strategies to stay ahead and attract attention all year round. Whilst other less privileged fashion cities often have to focus their resources on strategic events to at least attract attention some of the time. Let's look at some fashion cities. It's difficult to agree on a ranking system as there's so many tangible and intangible assets with which a fashion city could be measured on. The one I like to use is by Global Language Monitor, and here's their top 50 city list for 2014 with the top 10 highlighted. This ranking is based on a narrative tracking technology which analyses the internet, blogosphere, the top 250,000 print and electronic news media, as well as new social media sources as they emerge. The words, phrases and concepts are all tracked in relation to their frequency, contextual usage and appearance in global media outlets. So what fashion assets do the top 10 fashion cities have in common? Do they all have a fashion week, a fashion festival, a prestigious fashion design college, a fashion retail destination, or fashion collections in museums? No, but they're all likely to have at least two of these assets, and through these they'll have events drawing attention to them fairly regularly. I prepared a quick comparison of the top 10 cities, and there's some interesting information coming out. LA is at number 4. Its fashion week is only just emerging compared with the more mature fashion cities, and it's trying to establish local coordination for itself. But what it does have is a whole gamut of red carpet events, which we're all familiar with through the media, where fashion design is becoming a major part of the media interest. Rome is a surprise at number 6. We've heard a lot of mentions about Milan today, but Milan is actually at number 12, way down the list. There's a lot of internal competition. There's Florence also at number 13. Italy's clearly a fashionable and creative country, but this internal rivalry is drowning each other out on the internet. Antwerp's at number 9 with 2 amazing fashion assets in the Antwerp Academy of Fine Arts and also Momu, its fashion museum. It's the only city in the top 10 with no published ambition to host a fashion week, and I support this decision. The fashion week schedule's already crowded, so why launch another one? How would it be able to differentiate itself and draw buyers and press away from what's already a very well-oiled machine between New York, London, Milan and Paris? And it wasn't going to be long before a Chinese city hit the top 10. Shanghai was number 12 in 2013, and now it's crept in for 2014. It has all three important fashion city assets, plus half the fashion world looking at China as a business opportunity and talking about the opportunity to collaborate. My prediction is that Shanghai will be at number 6 or 7 for 2015. I've concluded there's a fashion city life cycle evolving, much like the fashion life cycle of a fashion brand. It goes through the startup, emerging, growth and mature stages. I thought it'd be interesting to look at the four most famous mature fashion cities and discuss them. And what makes them distinct in the minds of the fashion industry and tourists is as much to do with the fashion traditions and history of each city as it has to do with the city as it is now, as a place to visit and explore. But what do they have in common? Well, they clearly have a large share of ownership. Ooh, it seems to have gone pow. Okay, I'll stay on that one for a minute. I meant to be on that one actually. So yes, they have large shares of ownership in the major luxury brands. They also have they all have global and premier women's wear fashion weeks, and from next month they will all have menswear now that New York is joining in. They have a joined up strategic approach between major fashion events organisers and the city authorities who deal with inward investment, infrastructure and tourism. But something I want to highlight to you is the attendance. Milan has twice the attendance of Paris and London, and yet has dropped off the top 10, as I showed you earlier. And whilst London attracts less than 5% of the attendance of New York Fashion Week, it's clearly punching above its weight in terms of attention grabbing. And that's still too big. Let me just, is there any way we can shrink that down? Okay, well, I'll carry on talking whilst we're waiting for this slide. It's a very, very interesting slide from a press release from February, from London Fashion Week, and it's showing some of the...
No, es que...
Before that. Is it gone?
No.
Oh. Okay. That one. Okay. Sorry about this. So there is a good slide with a lot of evidence about how London Fashion Week it captures a lot of the social media and advertising and marketing outputs from London Fashion Week. And the numbers you would have seen, there's some gigantic numbers. They get £160 million worth of media coverage from each London Fashion Week. And these numbers reported from February. 329,800 mentions of London Fashion Week on Twitter. 120,000 images tagged hashtag London Fashion Week on Instagram. But what's interesting is there's only 5,000 visitors to London Fashion Week. But there is still attention-grabbing power within these 5,000 people. 78% of them apparently are tweeting during the 5-day event. And it's London Fashion Week's early adoption of social media that's helped keep London Fashion Week positioned in the top 4 cities, despite its actual relatively small size compared with, say, New York Fashion Week. And these are some figures from New York Fashion Week, where it starts to get very interesting on another level. Here's some data all about the direct impact on the travel and hospitality industries, as well as the wider economy. The first study, the first figures at the top, they're a little bit old now. They're from 2011, and they're the outcome of a study by some business students at Fordham University who were researching the economic impact of Fashion Week visitors on the Lincoln Square neighbourhood, where much of New York Fashion Week was based there. The second study analyses the wider spend and economic impact, and was published earlier this year by the New York City Economic Development Corporation, and their 2012 figures. These are big numbers demonstrating that a mature fashion week can make a positive economic contribution to its location. If we start to dig a bit deeper into what's going on in the fashion cities themselves, away from the fashion weeks, you can see there's a number of other fashion assets which fashion cities, through their fashion tourism strategies, can positively benefit from. Fashion weeks, fashion festivals, fashion design colleges, fashion retail destinations, and the fashion collections in the museums. What's distinctive about fashion tourism is that fashion people can take ownership of it and co-create and market their own events, and which can contribute to making a city a fashionable city. And what's exciting is that the events and cities that can work together on building assets rather than having to invest in new assets. Through my work, I've classified fashion tourism into 3 themes: study, sampling, and shopping. The first theme, study, can include a whole range of activities. International student mobility is important for fashion tourism. Students have a great experience studying abroad and then tell their friends and family, who may then visit in the future. They'll also set up businesses possibly in other countries, and through that the reputation of where they've trained will permeate. Likewise for trade fairs and at conferences, fashion tourism's success can be measured in terms of audience numbers. And as we saw from New York Fashion Week, that case study, there can be associated expenditure in hotels, transport, restaurants, cafes and retail stores, as well as local employment to actually stage the trade fair or conference. Not to mention the economic impact via the brands participating in the trade fairs themselves, who will be taking orders and then able to feed some of those revenues back into their value chain for marketing and manufacturing. Museums are significant contributors to fashion tourism, and fashion exhibitions can also create massive publicity for a city. And I apologise that you can't see the text there. But this piece is all about the Savage Beauty exhibition, which was in New York, which was staged in New York, as many of you will know, in 2011, and has moved over to London this year. The Savage Beauty 2011 exhibition is credited as one of the Metropolitan Museum of Art's all-time top 10 exhibitions, and it's an example of the blockbuster exhibition phenomenon. In order to accommodate the large crowds, the Met offered a $50 ticket to view the exhibition on Mondays, when the museum is usually crowded, and it sold over 17,000 of these tickets. They also allowed Met members to skip the line, and in doing so, museum membership increased 15%, with 20,000 new memberships sold during the show. They also extended the exhibition closure by a week, and during the final weekend of the exhibition, queues stretched to over 4 hours, and the museum stayed open until midnight for the first time in its history. By the time the exhibition closed, over 650,000 people had seen it, making it one of the most popular exhibits in the museum's history, and its most popular fashion exhibition ever. 4 years later, Savage Beauty is currently on show at the V&A Museum in London. It will hopefully have a similar record-breaking success as its New York counterpart. 2 months ahead of the exhibition opening, the V&A had already sold 30,000 advance tickets, and they took the decision to make an extra 50,000 tickets available and to extend the opening date by 2 weeks. I'm sorry again about the text, if there's something going wrong here. We're talking about touring exhibitions now, and the Fashion World of Jean-Paul Gaultier. It's one of my favourite all-time touring exhibitions. It started off at the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts in 2011, and it's been on a 5-year tour, taking in cities including Montreal, Dallas, San Francisco, Madrid, Rotterdam, Stockholm, Brooklyn, London, Melbourne, Paris, and Munich, where it's finally going to close next year in February. To date, it's been seen by more than 1.2 million visitors. The next theme is sampling. And in this theme, I've identified that there's a greater tendency to travel and explore. This might be locally, discovering areas on the fringe of a city because the city centre might already be quite well known, but the fashion tourist might not have explored further afield. It could include joining an organised tour with a guide, or even travelling on a fashion cruise. Visiting ateliers, workshops and studios are also popular in areas where fashion community opens its doors. This is more likely to happen either in conjunction with a tour guide, or it could be related to designer maker studios, where there's a dual workspace combining an atelier or workshop with retail. Other related fashion tourism activities could include attending film screenings with fashion themes, or participating in a fashion film festival, which is a growing genre. And then there's the attraction of watching red carpet events where fabulous designs are worn by some of the most glamorous celebrities. There's also a direct commercial collaboration between fashion brands and the travel industry, exemplified by the fashion hotel concept. There are Moschino and Armani hotels, interiors designed by Lacroix, Diane von Furstenberg, Missoni and Dior, and there's even an Alice Temperley designed teepee on the island of Mauritius. An increasingly high-profile fashion tourism project is the fashion festival concept, and these have been springing up all over the world. The earliest I know of is the Here Fashion Festival in France, launched in 1986, which is entirely creative and cultural, focusing on exhibitions and showcasing of young fashion and photography talent. The next one I know of to launch was through Closed Show Live, which was a TV show in the UK, and they launched an exhibition from that TV show in 1989. It's very retail driven. I've identified three main models of fashion festivals. Some fashion festivals focus on fashion shopping and use the venue and co-branding from the preceding official trade fashion week or event. They're cost effective as there's already a venue, events logistics, marketing and sales teams in place. And good examples are Singapore Blueprint, which follows on from Singapore Fashion Week, and the Copenhagen Fashion Festival, which immediately follows Copenhagen Fashion Week. Other fashion festivals might be founded by local fashion individuals who champion them. For example, the Fashion Clash Festival in Maastricht was founded in 2009 by three Maastricht Academy of Fine Arts alumni with a desire to create their own regional design talent platform. And the Edinburgh International Fashion Festival was launched in 2012 by a supermodel, Anna Fremantle, who opens up her fashion address book to bring in international fashion brands and champions. And there are also the festivals launched by local marketing stakeholders, such as the Dubai Fashion Shopping Festival, organised by the Dubai Festivals and Retail Establishments, and the Bath in Fashion Festival in the UK, which is run by the Bath Business Improvement District Agency. And now we come to shopping tourism, which I talked about earlier. And within this theme, you can also group concierge and personal shopper services, sample sales in major cities within the fashion trade, and there's also fashion miles and villages, which I want to talk to you about in more detail. These are some images from an outlet centre in the UK called Bicester Village, and it's an exemplar of where shopping tourism isn't just about purchasing local products at full price. At Bicester Village, it's about outlet designer brands. So it's about economic sensibility and savings for tourists. As I described earlier, we have a phenomenon of tourists travelling from, say, China to Europe or to the USA to purchase fashion goods and brands which might be 50 to 60% cheaper than back in their home country. Western brands are wising up to the fact that some tourists are actually bulk buying on their holidays to then return home and resell them, undercutting the full price items in stores over there. So the industry is looking at strategies to deal with this. But having said that, taking the discount fashion shop experience to a truly immersive sale level has been the growth of the out-of-town district shopping destinations like Bicester. And it's part of nine shopping villages by the Chic Outlet Shopping organisation, with 9 in Europe and 2 in China. They describe themselves as a pioneering new retail experience, redefining outlet shopping both for the world's leading brands and for the discerning, sophisticated global shopper. It's a clever high-end business model. Visitors are going with express reason to shop, and 6 million visitors go to Bicester Village every year, and each are spending between £800 and £1,500 per visitor. And there's an aggressive marketing campaign to attract incoming tour groups as well. 3 out of every 4 visitors to the UK apparently visit Bicester Village, and if they're visiting in a tour group, their group could be worth £30,000 to the village per group, just for a simple day's shopping. Interestingly, in-town discount shopping destinations are going to start popping up in a way of supporting regeneration in some cities in competition to the out-of-town business model. Close to where I often travel in London, a neighbourhood called Hackney, which is where many of the young fashion designer startups are clustering, they're developing a new high-end discount shopping destination, which we're going head-on with Bicester Village. It builds on the track record and shopping footfall evidence of Burberry's giant outlet store, which has been hidden in the neighbourhood for many years, and yet still manages to attract 1 million shoppers a year. This is a shop with no similar adjacencies. Its nearest stores are some small fast food chains and a large Tesco supermarket. The nearest high-end store would have been about 3 kilometres away. But in the last 18 months, it's attracted a few new neighbours into Hackney. Pringle, Aquascooter and Radley and Joseph all have outlet stores there, and more are going to be opening this summer, and there'll be around 100 in 7 years' time. The development, which is called the Hackney Fashion Hub, aims to create 450 local jobs across the various stores, a sewing academy, new workspaces for young designers and manufacturers will be created as part of the development. It's been a major consultation exercise that's 3 years in the making so far, and it involves the cooperation and support from local stakeholders, including the local community, creatives, designers, business support organisations and so on. Some of the designers in the neighbourhood, the intention is that their cool factor is going to be rubbing off on the fashion hub. So that will make it very distinctive from the formulaic approach from the Bicester Village model I described earlier. And there's other coolness coming into the area. So there's alignments with some cool media. We've got Dazed and Confused, who are going to be doing a poster wall in the neighbourhood. And there's going to be many other new concepts launching in the summer. So what next? Well, I can certainly see there's going to be more technology being used to inform, deepen or extend our experiences, such as the augmented reality that was deployed at a Friday late event in March at the V&A's Savage Beauty exhibition, where feathers could be transposed onto the audience faces. Or other innovations, such as the 5x2 metre interactive multi-touch wall that now greets visitors in Antwerp. There'll certainly be more rolling out of fashion tourism products and events, but I know that many cities at the start-up and early stages of maturity as fashion cities will be tempted to copy strategies from other cities without sensitivity to the local environment and people. Duplicating ideas from other cities doesn't work. Each city needs to retain its authenticity in its fashion tourism offer to be able to engage both local and visiting audiences. So I wanted to leave you with a quote from Andrew Bolton, the curator of the Costume Institute at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, who was interviewed for the Business of Fashion blog on Saturday just gone. He was talking confidently about the Institute's fashion prospects on the eve of the opening of the Met's summer exhibition. Other departments are now seeing the power of fashion to bring in visitors. Fashion is one of the most accessible and democratic art forms, transcending all art forms as a living medium that can address issues of race and nationality and the idea of stereotype. Thank you.